is incredibly high yielding. It's ridiculously easy to grow. It grows in very cold climates as well as warm ones. It contains all of the essential amino acids, and it's perennial, so it comes back every single year. You don't have to keep re-sowing seeds and putting them in the ground. And it's packed with prebiotics, which is really important if you're going to have a healthy gut microbiome. It does cause controversy among some, and I'll get into that later, but I'm of course talking about Jerusalem artichokes, or sunchokes. They've got nothing to do with Jerusalem, and they are not an artichoke, but they do taste a little bit like artichoke hearts. So why wouldn't you grow it? Well, before you do, just watch the whole video so that you don't go making any mistakes with it, because there are some reasons you might want to go easy. As far as how to grow it, that really is the easy bit. If we go back to March in 2024, these Jerusalem artichokes in here, they're about a foot apart. They're quite big ones. And I was debating putting them in because they're quite prolific, but I absolutely love them, so I don't really have any concern that they're going to overtake anything else. And then all you have to do, once you've put them in the ground at the beginning of the growing season, wherever you are, and then just wait. Only 3 months later, here's a picture of how big they were just from putting those tubers in the ground. I don't know, if you can find somewhere that you can grow them, you don't necessarily have to have access to your own growing space. Because in a small garden, they probably would take over a bit. Although, if you want to get rid of them, I think you can just either mow them, repeatedly cut them back, if you have a lot of them. Saying 2.8 minus 80 grams, so it's 2.72 kilos, and I barely dug any up compared to the size of the patch that's still there. Now, because they grow so readily and vociferously, sometimes people like to grow them in containers. You don't tend to get the same amount of yield as if you grow them in the soil. And one of the things that I find if I do grow them in containers is that they dry out pretty easily, and you see them wilting. And any wilting in the plant is going to significantly reduce its yield because you've massively stressed the plant. They will get out of the pots though, to be fair. If I left this pot on the ground, its roots would manage to get out of the bottom of the pot, and then it would be quite rapidly be able to start forming tubers. The other side of it, not too many for a big container, but like I said, I've allowed these to get a bit dry. According to the UK government, 40% of houses don't have the recommended 72 hours worth of food in their home, which events over the recent years have shown can easily become depleted in supermarkets. As a result of panic buying, it really can happen quite easily where you need to rely on some stored food in your house. Knowing where some of these are growing is going to be helpful, and if nothing else, it's going to be a free source of food. Prior to an apocalyptic state coming into existence, which increasingly seems more likely looking at global news events, Ask your neighbours if they like eating these and give away some of them, because you're going to get absolutely loads of them. And if your neighbours like them, then deepening your community bonds is going to be useful. I know that most survival talk is always based around individualistic I always wonder when people drive ridiculously noisy cars, what they think people think about them. Like, have they ever got laid as a result of doing that? I wonder whether anyone's ever got laid as a result of driving a really noisy car. And if nothing else, getting to know your neighbours better is good for your health. So you don't actually have to look at being prepared for adverse situations as being this overly individualistic thing where you have to develop an armoury of shit in your basement and think that the apocalypse is going to just mean you murdering zombies. According to the Trussell Trust, in 2023 and 2024, over 2.8 million people made use of a food bank, which is 4% of the UK's population. 1.14 million of those parcels were for kids, which represents 8% of the population of children in this country. So food insecurity and survival is a lived reality for lots of people today. You don't have to wait for global events to cause that. Check with your local food bank and some local charities like Fair Share, Food Cycle and Incredible Surplus, to name a few, just to see whether they accept fresh produce donations. Because if you've got some that's taken over an area of your garden, or you can't eat the ones that you've got, or maybe you've got them on your allotment plot and you don't particularly like them, then it's a good way of giving them away somewhere where people who are genuinely in need of fresh vegetables can get access to them. Carol Klein suggests here that it can be useful as a windbreak. And make no mistake, you will be needing plenty of windbreaks. The thought of subsisting on it entirely is pretty bleak. I'd just advise you not to have loads of it before you were to go on a first date. Because if you can figure out a way to actually harvest it, you would be able to single-handedly lower the gas prices globally. They're low glycemic index, and they have all of the essential amino acids with a moderate protein content of about 2 grams per 100 grams of the tuber. And the prebiotic inulin is sort of what the double-edged sword is about these, which is that once your gut is used to them, it does have some health benefits, which is why inulin is actually even available as a supplement to take, particularly for people with diabetes. And although a lot is talked about probiotics, a lot of research suggests that prebiotics, or the things that are not digested by your small intestine and pass into your large intestine, have quite a significant effect on your gut microbiome. If you live somewhere like the UK where the ground doesn't fully freeze and you can just dig them out, that's the easiest way to store them. Just dig them up as you need them. But if you do live somewhere where they do grow, like down to zone 2 or basically in the subarctic, the ground's going to freeze over, so you will need to have dug them out long before then. So dig them out after the first frost and then store them in a clamp, which is a way of storing root vegetables where you just put them in a large container with leaves or sand or damp compost and leave them somewhere like a shed or a garage where it's going to get cold, but they're not going to be completely inaccessible. Some of the ways that you can reduce the gas, the first one that I talked about is getting your gut used to it, so acclimatizing yourself, not eating absolutely loads on the first sitting and then going to that important job interview, but also fermenting them, which you can do if you put them into a 3% brine solution, pickling them, cooking them sufficiently, and I've heard that people suggest that you store them for a week before you eat them, and it reduces the inulin content, and some suggest digging them up after the first frost because that can help too. I think the main thing is to not just be solely reliant on them as your source of calories, especially if you haven't got yourself used to them. Be sensible, guys. They are genuinely really good. I think they're like the ones in those vegetable crisp packets that you always seek out. You're not quite sure what it is, whether it's a potato. I'm pretty sure they must put some of these in it, because this tastes just like they do in there. Most of the time I just chop them into chunks and roast them, and they have a sort of like a potato-like texture with a flavour of artichoke is the best way that I can describe it. I've had probably a good half a kilo. My arse is going to be active later. The lid is slightly ajar so that the gases that build up in this don't explode the jar. But all I've done is put a 3% brine solution into some that I've sliced on the mandolin into thin slices, and I didn't do that on camera because, I don't know, I didn't want to get famous for chopping my fingers off using the most dangerous tool in the kitchen that saves probably not that much time when you consider the hospital visit that it often requires you to do. If you're on an allotment, you've probably had loads of the allotment holders already trying to palm them off onto you because they produce so many in such a small area, and you don't really need to plant very many of them at all. You can just put 2 or 3 tubers in the ground and that'll keep you going. You won't even need to replant them. I was given these when I first got the plot, and when I released the video, a lot of people mentioned in the comments that I'd never get them off the plot. Last year I harvested all of them, and I didn't even attempt to leave any in the ground, but obviously you can't help but leave some there, and this is what's come back. Plenty of Jerusalem artichokes. I did dig out as many of them as I could this year. So for that amount of effort, I've had a ridiculous amount of crops out of it. I've seen some people claim that they have equally good ornamental value as edible, and I can only imagine that the people saying that don't like eating them. I take that about as seriously as my wife telling me that she doesn't actually want a birthday gift. Don't make that mistake. They don't mean it. So there are reasons why you might not want to grow it, but I think there should be more things in the pros column than in the cons. What do you think?